Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here with the final update of the season for the split shot Thea build. As you can see, the damage has gone through the roof even more. We're probably close to like 15 trillion, which is basically the theoretical damage cap for any one given skill. And it's just been an absolute blast. We've gone through, we've beaten the maximum city defense. We've gone through and beaten all of the Supreme Showdown here, all the way through SS21. And just a really fun build. And let's just talk about some of the major changes. However, if this is your first time tuning into the build guide, there's basically a step-by-step guide of kind of my progress through the build, and there's build codes for pretty much everything, from starting off as mind control all the way going into switching over to split shot and all that kind of stuff. I'd highly recommend kind of like going through and kind of following the steps, because it's very easy to like try to like skip ahead in Torchlight Infinite and kind of like get yourself underwater. But let's just kind of talk about some of the stuff here. So we pretty much have very similar gear to what we had before. I did get some improvements of like finally going out and buying a fancy blade chest with this modifier corroded. I didn't have this until very recently. The fourth modifier here is actually still really good if you don't have any other deterioration damage on the build. But I wanted to make sure that we got this because this is even better. This just gives us 200% more damage. And I decided to go for more life and energy shield just because I wanted to be even more tanky for SS20 and SS21. I didn't really feel like I needed the additional attack speed here at all. And so we're just kind of good there. Our attack speed, I believe, is still above 15 attacks per second, which is pretty important to check. You just do that by following this. You can see we're at 15.91. We're over the 15 attacks per second breakpoint, which is pretty much like where you want it to be. And then just other stuff we kind of started updating. Like we pretty much got all of our tier zeros and stuff done. All of these actually weren't done when we got our SS20 kill done, but it's still pretty fine. One thing I want to point out is that elemental and erosion resistance penetration is a pretty darn good stat that I kind of neglected in the build up to this point. We do have some from like our passives or from our pet basically, but I don't think that we're going to really be hitting the armor pen cap here at all. We have 32% erosion pen, which I think does get through all of the erosion, except for I think you need like 30 or 50 armor penetration in order to get through all the armor. So we're losing about like 30% of our damage to armor, since armor can affect erosion damage. And so getting like armor pen on boots might not necessarily be a bad thing. I still think that this is the best version of the weapon here. All physical prefixes with additional projectile damage, additional attack critical strike speed, and gear attack speed, sorry, and then critical strike damage here. I think this is all really good. But for the most part, the gear is pretty much finalized by this point. We have Corruption Curse, we have +2 active with Fervor. Our belt, we have the low mana and max channels. And then our rings, we're using the additional damage with main hand weapons and deterioration damage. I've had a lot of people ask about this particular mod here and why I do this as opposed to double damage. Well, if I had like 50% additional damage with main hand weapons versus 50% chance to do double damage, those are basically the same mod, except for the main hand weapon damage is active all of the time, whereas the double damage can like be active or could not be active. And generally, I don't really like double damage unless you can get it like very high percentage, because you can have some very wide range of damage then. With our critical strike chance not being 100% yet, we were pretty high up there, especially when we're actually hitting the dummy here. Our critical strike chance gets up there like 94% chance. That still means that like 5% of the time we're not critting and we're not benefiting from our massive critical strike damage, which kind of like makes the damage numbers look a little bit funky sometimes. And so same thing with double damage. If you can't get double damage to 100%, I don't think it's nearly as good. Now let's talk about the battle or the pack spirit page here. Realistically, this wasn't like maybe the perfect setup for my page. This is what I used to be SS20. I think I used the exact same thing for 21. And so I have pointer set up here, give me more deflection stacks. This seems to be bugged to actually give me +2 maximum deflection stacks, as opposed to giving me like +1 and then gain an extra 1 when you gain 1. This has added quite a bit of defenses for us. And I think that Wraith is like almost a no-brainer Kismet when it comes to damage. This just gives me additional, like, of our original damage as erosion damage. And since all of our damage starts as physical, that's like 30% of our damage added as more damage. So this is just a 30% multiplier. Pretty good thing to get. I picked up a lot of erosion res and spell block chance and block ratio on packs over here, mostly because I just needed them for my final setup. We have one thing here for slow, but that's pretty much it. We're using Traveling Lizard Violet along with our Portrait of a Fallen Saintess and Swaying Bonnie. You can go potentially and replace one of these with like a defensive pet if you really want to, or just like different offensive pets. Maybe like Knight of Pale Blue, I think is pretty good for SS20. It's not as good for SS21 because there's more than one enemy very frequently near you, which is just kind of the case there. But yeah, these are the pack spirits that I used here. Let's talk about a little bit of cheese that we were using in the SS20 and SS21 fights. So as you probably know, we don't stack blessings at all in this build. And typically what the blessing stacking does is allows us to apply a larger stack of desecration. This is like a nice multiplicative buff, but the problem with this is that you can only have this really on like one target at a time, unless you have this Tarnished Sage, which allows you to have it on 3 elites at a time. But for the most part, only one enemy is going to be taking more damage. And so if you're stacking tons of blessing buffs, you're removing defenses or you're removing increased damage to like everything, all for your single target. But that doesn't matter too much for SS20. So if you have blessings, it's, you know, kind of fine to have. However, there is one other thing that benefits from our blessing stacking, and that is Onset of Depravity. Then when inflicting desecration on an elite or boss for the first time, it deals true damage equal to 6% of their maximum life, and then 50% of the max desecration stacks is also applied to this value to deal true damage. And so we can do quite a bit of extra bonus, I guess you could say pre-culling strike damage, if we switch over to a setup that gives us lots of blessings here. And so when I go kill like SS20 here, I'm going to show you the difference between the two. So I was using my normal setup here. Let me make sure I have my right slate in. I do. So we can see that it's like just to the right of the left side of the final buff there. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to put on a full set of gear here that gives me blessings. And this is just temporary. I can actually pause the game to to unequip this stuff, and it's not going to mess anything up. So what I'm just going to start doing is just spinning, and then it's going to hit him. And we can see right here that the buff has moved. The amount of damage we've taken away basically is this extra point just from a gear swap. And this might not seem like that big of a deal, but when you're in a fight that requires you to kill the boss, you know, as fast as you possibly can, getting an extra like maybe 10% or 5% there is pretty big. Then I would recommend going out and getting yourself a Howling Wind, corroded, so that you eliminate enemies under 15% life on hit. This is like 10, 20 FE right now. And so you're basically chopping off a huge section of their life on the front end and a huge section of their life on the back end. You get to fight so much less of this particular boss, and really just any boss if you want to do this, as long as you like pause the game when you open up your menu. It's really easy to switch between the two. There's no like real downside necessarily to this, which I think is pretty good. And yeah, our big defensive layers that we built up to like let us tank some stuff here is getting attack block chance and spell block chance all over the place here. And so right now our defenses for this are, where is this? So we have 116 attack block and 100 spell block. This did mean that I did change my rings around a little bit. We have attack block chance on the ring here, and then we have attack block chance on the ring here as well. So we kind of changed that around. I think we changed around our belt for a little bit more resistance and our boot as well. Note that our bow here, unfortunately, what is it? Our ring has negative lightning resistance. So this has kind of been screwing up our build a little bit here. This negative lightning res pretty much makes it so that I have to have this on belt. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to be resistance capped. And even right now, we're not like super duper perfectly resistance capped, which is rather annoying. However, it kind of is what it is. For our candles, soul candles, we have poison immunity, and this gives us so max erosion res. We're converting 25% of our physical damage taken and elemental damage taken to erosion damage. And it has a negative elemental resistance mod on here, but we just counter that out with the next line. And then curse effect is not a bad thing to have. Ideally, this would have like +1 max channel instead of curse effect, but that candle didn't exist when I was looking for it. And then I have +1 curse, so we're getting this instead of having it from the pack spirit. And then poison relief gives us injury buffer, so anytime we take damage, 25% of the damage is kind of taken over time. Instead, it's not actually a damage over time thing, but it's kind of delayed, if you would. And then you take 15% at less damage when you're at low life, which means that we're going to go into our skills here. And we're actually going to put like extra stuff on here so that we're going to be below 35% life all of the time. And this just pretty much makes sure that we are, always low life. So we take less damage, and it just really makes that modifier really stinking insane. For our slates, I did make a couple of changes here. One, our Pedigree of Gods. I bought one here that has defensiveness and Beyond Cure. I've had a lot of people DM me and ask me, what should I do if I can't get defensiveness or Beyond Cure? These don't exist. What's going on? What should I do? Blah, blah, blah. Really, the only important part here is defensiveness with something that is a damage increasing modifier. And there's a ton of them. You might want to go and just read through them. I'll kind of show you what my conditional over here looks like right now. So stuff like Great Strength, Sweep, Quick Ritual, Dirty Tricks, because then we could take this off the belt. Shooting Arrows, Forbidden Power. I think Shooting Arrows is a second line, so it wouldn't show up anyways. Some of these are probably second lines as well. Dirt, Beyond Cure, Indifference, Defensiveness, Impending, Brutality, and Mind Flow. I just have all of this on a slate search here. And then what I'll do here is I will, I say that I need 2 of them in this particular setup here because I have defensiveness in here. And then I will just go and say that I need defensiveness again. Like so. I think I have the other line here. Like so. And there's a few of these available right now. So we have like Forbidden Power, Quick Ritual, Dirty Tricks, Forbidden Power, Quick Ritual, Impending. And so I think that like there are some options here. It's not necessarily you have to go with one particular thing. Worst case scenario, you're just going to go and only do defensiveness and figure something else out. You lose a little bit of damage. It's not really the end of the world, but even some stuff in here could potentially still be pretty good. You just kind of have to figure it out for yourself. The defensiveness part does help a lot. Now you can get around needing defensiveness at all though, if you have a lot of room left on your pacts, because you can get these micro fates that give you up to 3% block ratio. And so realistically, if my resistances weren't such a hot mess and my spell block wasn't such a hot mess, I could fill the entirety of my micro destiny slots here with these block ratio ones. And if I had about 10 of these, we would be able to do that. Now you can get a undetermined fate here. So if we go over here to undetermined fates, you can get undetermined fates that are all like micro slots basically. And these are going to be pretty expensive because people are using them for stacking some of the minion stuff in here and doing some star situation. But like 7,500 here is not really all that bad a price. So you can get additional 3 slots from that. All of the slots in the undetermined fate don't necessarily count towards the fate count that you have up here of 9 and 4. And so, yeah, this is like really just kind of capstone, finishing up your final steps of the build type of stuff. You don't necessarily need to do this at all for any farming in the game, except for like killing SS20 and getting that block chance and getting that block ratio up. Pretty much the way the block ratio works is your block chance determines whether or not you block an attack or spell. And then the block ratio reduces the damage by its amount. And block ratio is capped at 60%. So right now I have 59% less damage. And since I have 100% of both spell and attack block, we pretty much just block everything except for maybe damage over time, and reduces our damage by 60%. And you can make some skill changes here if you wanted to give yourself some more defenses. So instead of going aim, you could potentially go frost shield. You could even go delayed pain if you want to give yourself some more injury buffer. I personally worked in Shackles of Malice into my build. I thought that this was actually going to be a lot harder to set up, but this was actually pretty easy. You just have activation medium track here, and you want to make sure that you always have the locks on enemies within 20 meters. You don't necessarily need to use activation medium track. There's like a whole bunch of different activation mediums that will work. This one is the one I decided to go with. We have overload here that adds a little debuff to slow enemies movement and attack. And then the Shackles of Malice defile here gives us 42% additional curse effect for targets up to 4 seconds. I think this goes up to like 45% or something at the maximum roll. And this is pretty good because we have 2 curses, one on amulet here, and then the other one on ring on hit. And our candle gives us +1 curse, this one here. So we can have all of the curses active, and that's like 39% damage per curse. And so this particular like little setup here is giving us 42% of that. So that's pretty darn effective. I don't know what the exact math on that is on the top of my head, but if it's 39 times 0.42, that's 16% damage. So we're pretty much getting 32% multiplicative damage here on Shackles, which I think is pretty good. I don't really care too much about aim. If you don't want to do Shackles, instead you could do something like Fixate. This is pretty good as well. You could even, potentially do like Burst of Anger. I think that that's fine as well. Or you could just do like Frost Shield to give yourself more defenses. I definitely used Frost Shield for a while learning the SS20 fight, but once I kind of felt like I knew the mechanics, I wanted even more damage so we can push that 3-star clear. And so I went a little bit harder into the damage setup. I was even using Aegis of Fire a little bit because I didn't have enough attack and spell block. We re-rolled a bunch of our memories to actually get ourselves the block. And, it just worked out for us. Now, I'd still recommend doing Tarnished Sage probably when you're mapping. This is just a little bit better. But Disgrace Minister is good for bossing. And that's pretty much it, I think, for the video guide. I'm going to have a written guide where we have a ton of information in there. If this was a little confusing to you because you haven't watched any of the other Thea videos, highly recommend you go check them out. Still, I think the things that you need to get started with this build are pretty simple. You need these split shot supports. So you need rapid advance and you need diversion. The prices on these kind of go up and down a lot, especially as people are kind of like getting out of the season or they're going and they're updating their supports here. We can see it's like about 120-ish for that one. And then about 140-ish for this one, which is kind of funny because I think this one's more important. It's like 200-ish FE, which is not really all that bad. You do still need a slate that is going to 100% convert your physical into erosion damage. That's super important. And getting yourself 100% chance to apply deterioration is pretty important because you are going to be using the blight chest here, which gives you a lot of damage for every stack of deterioration you have. And so at first, you're probably not going to have super great attack speed. So your deterioration stacks are not going to be up all of the time. Like my wilt spike keeps most of my deterioration stacks up pretty easily. But if I take that out and I'm like shooting at a pretty far distance here, we can see that even me is like not super duper far above 8. And if I use my movement skill a couple of times, the stacks are down below 8. So we're losing quite a bit of damage just from that. And so really, really important to get your deterioration chance to apply in there. Each 1% that you lose is about 1% less damage done, which kind of sucks. It is just a huge part of our build. This is giving us a lot of deterioration damage. Our like whole setup is giving us a ton of deterioration damage, especially wilt spike here, giving us a lot of damage from this. And so not having 100% chance to apply deteriorate is pretty bad. And then, of course, you just use a bow. You'll be good to go. Hopefully this video helped you out. Check out the written guide coming to heroic.gg soon. And thanks so much, guys, for following along with this build. I might go back and do some other build. There's some other interesting builds, I think, that are new to this season that I do want to check out. But I haven't really made up my mind yet. We're probably going to go play some D4 for a little bit. Hopefully you guys have a good one and come by the stream. Later.